Elon Musk's Twitter poll may be a farce. Stanford University announces its elimination of harmful language initiative. And the California Reparations Task Force suggests paying descendants of slaves nearly $500,000. I'm Julie Hartman, and this is Timeless. Welcome everyone. It is Wednesday, December 21st, 2022, 4 days away from Christmas. Woot woot. I want to remind you that you can all email me at julie@julie-hartman.com. One of my favorite parts of this job is hearing from listeners. And I just have to tell you a funny story that over the weekend, I got an email from one of our listeners, shout out to Caroline. And she's been listening to Dennis and Julie for quite some time now, and we've exchanged some emails over the past few weeks. And she wrote to me and she said, Julie, I've been watching your show Priceless, and I think it's so good. Congratulations. And I thought, oh no, I'm gonna have to tell her. So you know what? I think that's a great alternative name if you want to call my show Priceless instead of Timeless. I want my show to be both priceless and timeless. So anyway, I just thought you would all find that to be funny. And please do email me with whatever you want to talk about, and I will try my best to respond. Now, before we go on to the big news stories of the day, I want to provide you with some quick updates on some news items that I've talked about this week. So Chief Justice John Roberts announced that he is putting a temporary stay on the expiration of Title 42. As those of you who listened to my interview with Jessica Vaughn yesterday may know, Title 42 is a law in which the United States can prevent immigrants from coming into the country and deport immigrants who are already in the mainland if they pose a medical threat. So Donald Trump enacted this when he was president, when COVID first came to the fore, and the Biden administration was going to let it expire, but Chief Justice John Roberts has said that it will not expire. So the Biden administration has to file a brief in opposition by today, so the Supreme Court can consider what to do next on this Title 42 issue. Another quick update has to do with our friend SBF, whose name is no stranger to this broadcast. He has announced that he is not fighting extradition from the Bahamas any longer. So he will allow himself to be tried and prosecuted here in the United States. And on to the bigger news story. I reported yesterday about a poll that Elon Musk ran in which he asked his Twitter users a very simple question. Should I run Twitter? 58% of the respondents said no, and 42% said yes. And so if this was a legitimate poll, then if he follows it, Elon Musk will step down as CEO of Twitter and pick someone else to be his successor. But I was reading more on this story last night, and I came across something interesting. There is some speculation that this poll was not what it seemed, that it was actually just a cunning ploy by Musk to catch left-wing bots, because obviously he can see how many of them voted or if all of them voted at the same time. And this speculation is unearthed by an account, this is at kim.com, who tweeted the funny message saying, I'm hoping that Elon did this poll as a honeypot to catch all of the deep state bots. The data set for this poll will contain most of them. Some good data mining, and he could kill them all in one go. So Musk actually responded to that tweet saying, interesting, which depending on how you read it, what tone you read it, he could be confirming that that was in fact what he was doing. I just think that this is so great if this turns out to be true. It's moments like these when we should clink our glasses, because the left is going to go crazy if this poll was actually a farce and he was just doing it to expose the left-wing Twitter vigilantes. They're going to complain and say that Musk is so awful and he's so unserious and he tricked us and it's white supremacy and mansplaining and unspoken bias, but it's hilarious, not to mention a brilliant way to go after these online trolls. So kudos to you, Mr. Musk. Now, in other news, Stanford University has announced its new Elimination of Harmful Language initiative. You can guess where this is going. It's not fun. They say that they have launched, a multi-phase, multi-year project of the school's IT leaders that took 18 months of collaboration with stakeholder groups to produce. And they also say in their description that this is one of the actions prioritized in the Statement of Solidarity and Commitment to Action, which was published by the Stanford CIO Council and the People of Color in Technology Affinity Group back in December 2020 as part of an IT strategic initiative. So if you were confused by that sentence that I just read to you, I don't blame you. This is what I was talking about yesterday with regard to Elon Musk, that there is such a difference between the way that the left makes decisions and the way that a Musk or a Donald Trump makes decisions. Some could legitimately argue, as I suggested yesterday, that if Musk's poll is true, and he is actually using it to determine whether or not he should step down from Twitter, that is sort of a rash, volatile, personality-driven way to make such an important choice. And again, the charges of him being volatile are not wrong. But what's great about that kind of Muskian decision-making is that it's confined. It's simple and straightforward. You know what you're getting. You know who's in charge and what's going on. It's one poll held by Musk. It's open for 12 hours. If the majority votes no, then he's out as CEO. And if the majority votes yes, then he stays. Done. That stands in such, I think, blissful, stark contrast to this Stanford thing, this convoluted, who the hell is in charge, multi-phased, 18 months of collaboration between a council, an affinity group, a strategic initiative. It's such a contrast to this bureaucratic labyrinth of nonsense. So let's look at what these committees and task forces and experts produced here with the Stanford Initiative. They have published an index of language that is offensive or harmful, which they say must be removed from the school's website and its computer code. And first on their list of no-nos is the term American. They say that American often refers to people from the United States only, thereby insinuating that the United States is the most important country in the Americas. So they are suggesting that they replace the term American with US citizen. Before I go on, I just want to point out that in addition to this being so stupid, it's just plainly not true. The reason why we call ourselves Americans, believe it or not, Stanford, is not because we think we are the best country in the America continents. It's because our country is the only name in those continents that has the word America in it. Canadians are called Canadians because their country is named Canada. Mexicans are called Mexicans because their country is called Mexico. Colombians because it's called Colombia. I can't even believe I have to explain this. The list goes on. So what I want to ask these people is, what were we supposed to do? Call ourselves the Uniteds instead of Americans? Then they'd be saying, oh, well, you're the only country who thinks that you're united. That's bigotry. So it just shows how truly deranged their lines of argument are. Yet another example of this derangement is that they oppose the term immigrant. They say that it should be replaced by person who has immigrated in order to not refer to people by simple characteristics, which they say is a bad thing. They have also stipulated that you cannot say that you conducted a blind study because, quote, it unintentionally perpetuates that that disability is somehow abnormal or negative, furthering an ableist culture. So they actually say that it should be called a masked study instead, which is just the ultimate irony. And relatedly, they say that walk-in office hours must be replaced with open hours so as not to offend those in wheelchairs. And also the terms gangbusters and brown bagged lunch are banned for supposedly having racial undertones. And the common phrase, beating a dead horse, is also flagged because it normalizes violence against animals. Yes, again, this is Stanford University. So this obviously is not new among universities enacting horrible speech codes. Haverford College has an honor code that says that students could be punished for committing a microaggression, and that political beliefs that perpetuate discrimination violate that honor code. I talk on this program a lot about how Elon University famously banned the word freshman because it has the word man in it, and Cal Poly State University in San Luis Obispo has urged its students to avoid gendered language. So we all know that this is not exactly new. But when we talk about these instances, we focus on the fact that it is wokeism taken to the extreme. But what we don't discuss enough is how much of these policies, even more than wokeism, reek of elitism. Because it's actually the elite environments that give people the luxury and the leisure of being so woke. In a recent conversation with someone who grew up on a farm in the rural South, we were discussing why middle-class virtues like honesty, straightforwardness, and having a sense of duty have vanished from modern American life. And we see with the Stanford Elimination of Harmful Language initiative that there is a subversion of these virtues. It's totally dishonest, it's convoluted, and above all else, it's an assault on free speech and the character of our country. But what this individual who I was speaking with said is that the reason that these are called middle-class virtues is that these are virtues that are required to survive in normal, non-elite daily life. He was telling me that when he was younger and he was working on his grandfather's farm, he said, if my grandfather asked me, did you lock the chicken coop? I had better tell the truth, because if I didn't, then that night a stray dog would come in and eat the chickens. Or he said, if I had told someone that I would plant a field of corn, I better keep my promise, because in a few months, people would be able to find out if he had completed it or not. In other words, in that way of life, honesty or duty are not just good things to strive for. They are expectations. They are necessities. Your survival and your success and the survival and success of those around you depend on those virtues. So much of the corrosiveness destroying our country is made up in boardrooms and in classrooms from an increasing number of people in this country who are disconnected from regular life. They don't have the same need to be honest and straightforward as people in quote-unquote regular America do. This level of sludge that we see coming from Stanford could only happen and be rewarded in a rarefied artificial environment, because it's only people at elite universities who have the luxury to be able to pontificate and sermonize about the implications of what a word might mean if the term brown bagged lunch is a microaggression. Again, they're not expected to be as honest and realistic in the same way that someone working in a real job is. And speaking of another thing that is just invented in boardrooms and thrusted on the rest of us, the California Reparations Task Force has preliminarily suggested that the state pay descendants of slaves about $500,000. Again, this is not fully enacted into law yet, but this is their preliminary recommendation, and they still have 6 months to finalize their plan. The task force was created back in September of 2020 by California Governor Gavin Newsom and the state legislature in order to rectify past wrongs of discrimination. And so this task force has calculated this number, this about $500,000 payment, by saying that Black people deserve about $223,000 as a result of housing discrimination and redlining, about $125,000 due to mass incarceration, and $127,000 due to supposedly shortened life expectancies. And the task force says that this number may grow because they're still evaluating the, quote, devaluation of Black businesses and unjust property taking. One of the people who I think discusses this issue in an incredibly thoughtful and nuanced way is Carl Jackson. He's my fellow colleague here at the Salem Media Group, and he has a podcast of his own called The Carl Jackson Show. Welcome, Carl. Thanks for coming on to Timeless.
Hey, thank you for having me, Julie. I really appreciate it.
So I was just talking about this announcement coming from the California Reparations Task Force, which is the first in the union. Then they've said that they are preliminarily recommending that the state give close to $500,000 to descendants of slaves in reparations. And I'm also reading that this is not the only place in the country, it may be the first, but it's not the only, that is considering doing similar things like this. Detroit City Council has unanimously approved that it would structure the city's first reparations task force. Even a small town in Massachusetts, Amherst, has said that it will fund a total of $2 million that will go towards reparations. So, Carl, what is your opinion on this?
Well, as much as I like money, Julie, I don't want money this way because I've not been a slave. I've not suffered as slaves have. And I think this is absolutely disgusting. I got to be frank. This really disturbs me. It disturbs me that blacks would even want to take the money. And you would know this better than I, given the fact that you're a history major, Julie. But there's only a small percentage of Americans that have any connection to slavery whatsoever. And I'm speaking of white Americans. It doesn't make sense to me, and it puts blacks in this perpetual victim mentality. And honestly, it's so disgusting to me. I wish more blacks would turn it down. I heard the comedian Faizon Love said if blacks get reparations, the only thing that we would buy would be Cadillacs and Mercedes Benzes. And it's sad, but there's an element of truth to that. But I don't see the point in offering people reparations, people that were never slaves, reparations. I think it's sickening. And all I think it does is create this perpetual divisiveness that exists inside of our culture now, and that the left is trying to promulgate and keep alive. It's just sickening. I'm a little frustrated by this. I'm really disturbed by this story. I could crack some jokes, but I got to be honest with you. I'm pretty mad. Frankly, I'm tired of it. I'm tired of blacks being depicted as victims. I'm tired, frankly, of the blacks that and this might sound harsh, I would consider blacks that continuously sell out to the left sellouts. I don't believe that people like myself, black conservatives, or I like to consider myself a constitutional restorationist, I don't believe that we are the sellouts. And I believe this is just another way for the left to control blacks. So what's going to happen when the money runs out? What's going to happen when blacks that perhaps don't handle money well do go out and buy a Cadillac or a Mercedes or a BMW? What's next? Are they going to need more? But this is insane. I really think that it's time for the right to fight back against this nonsense verbally as much as possible, and whatever they can do legislatively, because this has to stop. Unless we're going to exhume, dead people, the money is worthless to dead people. What are we going to do? Exhume slaves? This is insane. We've just gone mad in America. The left has driven us batty.
Well, another thing that, I can't figure out is how are you going to determine who is a descendant or a slave? And also, is this coming from taxpayers writ large? Are black taxpayers not going to have to give funds for in other words, is it only going to come from white taxpayers? It just seems that the system is hopelessly convoluted, and it's really more about the proclamation of it, showing that this is something that California supposedly cares about, than actually sorting out details that would make this thing run smoothly.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. This is impossible to figure out. And then I'd like to know, are blacks going to get reparations from ancestors of the chieftains that sold us out? I know that everybody loves the story of Kunta Kinte, but it's not real. It's fake. You didn't have Europeans going to the coast of Africa and hunting black people down with big old butterfly nets. I mean, it didn't happen in that way. Sadly, slavery was universal, and frankly, I mean, we've progressed. We've progressed so far in society to keep hashing this stuff up is complete and utter nonsense to me. But blacks were slave owners, Arabs were slave owners, Native Americans were slave owners. Everyone participated in the slave trade. No one is innocent. No one is guilt-free. So how you would determine who this money would go to even, I absolutely have no clue. I have no clue. But sadly, listen, you have a bunch of wokesters in California, a bunch of leftists that want to continue to virtue signal, and that's what the left continually does. When they don't have God, everyone is in search of a moral authority of some sort. Leftists find it in CRT. They find it in all this trans nonsense. Whatever they can do to virtue signal because they're totally void of God, they'll do. And sadly, blacks, in my opinion, I'm a Christian, and I feel like too many blacks will buy into this nonsense because they don't have forgiveness in their hearts. At some point, you got to let this crap go. Why is it that blacks are the only ethnic group where we constantly feel like we're these perpetual victims? You've got people coming from all across the world, all around the globe, to try to get into the United States. We've got a border crisis. That's illustrative of how great America is, and yet we, as a black people, want to continuously buy into this hype that the left continues to sell us. I think it's just time to forgive and move on. And honestly, it's hard for me to even argue that point simply because we have nothing to forgive. I wasn't a slave. I don't know any slaves. I don't know anyone who was a slave. So this is just crazy.
Carl, I want to talk to you a little bit more about your journey because I'm really struck by the anger and the passion and the vigor in your voice. You seem to really see this for how it is. And it's what it is. I believe it is systemic racism. There is systemic racism in this country, but it's coming from the left wing. It is people on the left who are advocating to lower standards for blacks. That's not what right-wingers are saying. It's people on the left who are advocating for all black dormitories. It's people on the left who are saying that we have to defund the police when we all know that that harms black communities the most. So did you always feel this way, or did you have a transformation? Like I know Larry Elder, who you hosted his show for a while, and I know that he kind of had a transformation where he saw the brainwash. Did you have a similar thing, Carl?
Yes, I sure did. And mine, great question. Mine came as a result of my faith. I mean, I was a little wannabe thug, a little heathen, getting into trouble, honestly, playing around with girls. I mean, you name it, just trying to live, just living a crazy lifestyle. And God radically changed my life. I had a child, or I have a daughter, but I had her out of wedlock with a woman that I thought I was going to marry at the time. But it was like Bonnie and Clyde. We would have never worked out. It was insane. But it was crazy. But God radically changed my life. I went to jail a couple of times.
Wow.
Thank God I never went to prison. Thank God that they weren't very long extended stays, but even then I didn't necessarily learn my lesson. But God started to shape my heart and to change my heart, no doubt. But eventually I ended up fighting for custody of my daughter. And when I began to fight for custody of my daughter, here I was raised in a two-parent home, although my mom died when I was very young, but I was raised in a two-parent home, and that's what I wanted. I was raised with a religious background, and that's what I wanted for my child. And then when I went to court to fight for custody, the odds were against me big time. But I continued to fight. But it was amazing to me that the harder I fought, it seemed as though the court system didn't want me to be a father. So I started thinking about this, and I'm like, here I am. I hear all these stories of these guys that don't want to be a father. I'm fighting my butt off to be a father. I was broke as a joke. I had just recently gotten out of jail, and I had no money. I mean, I was working a job. I would always work my tail off. So I was working a job, but I just didn't have a lot of money. Thank God I ran into an attorney that believed in me, believed in the fight, and that allowed me to pay payments. And this was a wealthy attorney who at the time, thank God, another lawyer, honestly, my criminal attorney hooked me up with her, a woman by the name of Neva Kelleher, and she fought for me, and she allowed me to make payments where she never did that before. But within the system, I just saw how the system was stacked against me, not because I was black, but because I was a man. And I would go to, I would pay child support. My daughter literally lived with me, and I still pay child support. It was the craziest thing. But another topic for another day. But nonetheless, the people that seemed to hate me the most were the women. I would go into these offices and pay child support, and there was just this disdain. It was so thick you could cut it with a knife. And I'm sitting here like, dude, I am doing everything. I'm the one taking care of my daughter. And it's not to knock. Her mom and I get along fine now, but at the time things were really, really bad. And I'm sitting here just thinking, man, these people are doing, at every turn they try to stop me from being a father. And I just wondered how many men gave in to this. And I'm not trying to make it a male female thing, but I do wonder. But I just noticed how government in the way did not want me to be a father. And that frustrated me to no end. And that again started turning me closer to God. Eventually, I went to a church that I attend to this day, Faith Assembly in Orlando, where a man, and I'll be talking about this on Officer Tatum's show, a man by the name of Jim Angelakis. I actually went there to serve probation. And this guy just hugged on me and loved on me and treated me like I wasn't a criminal there to serve probation. And that is what broke me. But obviously, there were things I believe that God orchestrated leading up to that point that began to change my heart. So the combination of jail, of fighting for my daughter, and getting the resistance from the government, if you will, and then running into a white dude, no less, in a church that embraced me, the first man to say that I love you. I mean, it broke me. I was crying like a baby, Julie. I'd never heard those words from a man. And I tell you, at that moment, I felt the love of God in my heart. And at that moment, I believe God changed my heart. I truly believe that. I began to see the world differently. I began to see whites differently.
Once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Thank you. Very, very well said. Yes.
I found that when I became conservative. It was like I was in a dark room my whole life, and then they flipped the light switch on, and I was like, oh, this is how the world really is.
Man, so true.
What a moving story you have. And I'm so happy that you found that religious leader because, sometimes I think just in general, there are black people who maybe can suspect at times that they've been brainwashed, but they don't have someone to really provide them with that love and support that you had. And by the way, it's not just with black people, it's the same thing with liberals and leftists. I feel like so many people who I went to college with sometimes can get a little flicker of truth, and they know that they've been brainwashed, but they don't have a good role model or an example to kind of see them through to the other side. Carl, did you ever have moments of doubt when you were going through this? Did you ever think, this ideological transformation I'm having maybe isn't legitimate? Did you ever face that?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'll tell you a story real quick here specifically. When Trayvon Martin and the George Zimmerman issue broke out, it was right here in Florida, in Stanford, Florida, not too far from where not too far from where I live in Orlando. And as the news was reported here, Julie, in real time, the news was that a white skinhead had shot and killed a black young man. And I sat there, and at the time I was blogging and writing for different outlets, and I sat there and I just said, dude, did I get this wrong? Did I get this wrong? Am I this guy? Am I the sellout? Am I this guy out here saying racism doesn't exist and all this and that? And then this guy gets shot and killed by some skinhead, and it's not too far from where I live. And then as I started looking into the story, and actually as they showed a picture of George Zimmerman on television, I sat there and said, well, I'll be damned. This was my thing. Excuse my language. But I was like, I'll be damned. This fool is Spanish. That's exactly what I said. And I was like, the media is lying to me. So actually, it was a brief moment in time where I doubted the things that I began believing, because I believed that there was a media that was honest as well. And then I come to find out, they weren't honest. They were shaping a narrative between George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin. And to this day, I know a lot of people say bad things about George Zimmerman. He went cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. There's no doubt about it. But he went cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs because this was a guy that would mentor young black men. George Zimmerman was a liberal. I met his family. George Zimmerman was a liberal. And the way the media handled this guy, he just went nuts. It was like PTSD. The guy went nuts.
It's so fascinating to hear moments like that, because you have a moment of doubt, but then it just redoubles your belief that you had before. I also had a similar experience with that in the wake of the Black Lives Matter riots, and that's what made me a conservative. And then I saw another police killing in I believe it was in Wisconsin a few weeks after George Floyd died. And I thought, oh my gosh, am I on the wrong side of history? But then you dig and you learn more of the facts, and it actually makes you stronger in your convictions.
Absolutely. So true.
Yes.
So true.
Carl, thank you so much for coming on to Timeless. I hope to have you on many times in the future. And everyone, you should listen to the Carl Jackson Show. I listen to your show, Carl. I don't know if I've even told you. I try to listen to you almost every day, because one of the biggest pieces of advice I've gotten in media is to listen to people who are smart. So you are at the top of that list. You're a great role model for me. So thank you very much for coming onto the program.
Listen, that is a major compliment coming from someone that I consider to be an intellectual giant. So God bless you. I appreciate everything that you are doing. Julie, it's not bad when you have beauty and brains. You and I have that in common. Beauty and brains. I love that.
You definitely have that. I don't know if I do, but I'll take it, Carl.
You got it. You got it. All right, Julie. Listen, I appreciate you having me on. I really do. I love what you're doing, and keep it up.
Thank you, Carl. Talk soon.
All right. Take care.
I want to remind you to please consider donating to the Sheriff's Relief Foundation. You can donate to them by Venmoing them at SRA Foundation 1, and I will also put the mailing address in the description below. And remember, like a sculptor starting out with a block of clay and the tools to form it, each of our thoughts, choices, and actions shapes who we are. So let's think clearly, choose wisely, and act with principle and determination. See you tomorrow. Thanks so much.